heat from the fire. Summary, wildfires are a year-round threat to communities in New Mexico, including Rio Doce. To prepare for impacts of wildfires, we continue to identify your local wildfire problem, monitor your local wildfire environment, reduce the fuels, consistent with expected fire behavior and topography. Create a vegetative fuel strategy to keep fire on the ground. Just from the little information I've given you tonight, I think everybody can go home and do a better job of being able to protect their home. Make your home defensible and plan for any considerations you have. Now then, am I running over? I want to run through the swallow fire. This was a case in point, the swallow fire over here. It was up behind K-Bob's about 2 years ago. This was an area that had been thinned. According to village ordinances, all the lots hadn't been thinned. But it shows you a lot of examples of what I've been talking about. Okay, the motel was sitting right down there. You can see the amount of ladder fuel that was down there. A lot of those trees didn't even burn, but it came up that little chimney right at you. And that particular day, there was a 40, 50 mile an hour wind blowing. But the wind was blowing across. But because of the topography, they took that wind and pushed it right up that little chimney. And the fire came right up through there, torched out some trees, and got up onto the deck of 5 houses on both sides of the canyon, and actually burned the houses. You can see the trees that were there that were so close to the house, so they got probably radiant heat and convectional heat too, and a lot of sparks. Burned houses on both sides of the canyon. Now this is a picture that somebody took as that fire was coming up out of there. That's a nice home. It's got those trees in front. These are the same trees, and that's the house. And so, in this instance, the house burned the trees. The trees didn't burn the house. And this is another one that was right there where that fire came up. And this was a fire that was across the street. In this instance, there was a grandmother and 3 little kids that were in this house, and the neighbor came and told them their house was on fire. Well, their house didn't catch fire. The main fire was coming from this direction towards the house. But what had happened was that fire got in grass, and I don't know whether there was any wood in the wood rack or not, but back on the back corner of their house, there was a wood rack there. They also had a wooden fence. So that fire got on the ground, either got in their wood or got on the wooden fence and was hot enough to start their house on fire. And that shows you where the wood rack. And this is where fire came across the top of the wood rack. But where there's trimmed trees, there's no ladder fuels, it's all underburned. Trimmed trees. Across the street there were some ladder fuels there, but on this particular side of the street where the fire was, it underburned. And the other thing it was that it was open enough. I don't know whether you remember, they had some slurry planes there, seaplanes, and the seaplanes dropped some slurry in there, and slurry can't put out a crown fire. There's just no way you can do it, because all it is wet clay. And with too much heat and a large fire to do that. So the only way that slurry can help, and they call it fire retardant, not fire preserver, it gets to the grass and the fine fuels, raises the soil, the fuel moisture that's in that plant, and retards the speed at which it burns. It allows the firefighters time to get in there and actually go fire lines or whatever they do. There again, this was an example. That other big house that was burned was right over there. No fuel on the ground, trimmed trees, even though they had some. I'll talk just a minute about the big trees. There's no need, I think, to cut the big trees around your house because heat dissipates up. And if a big tree gets on fire, most of its heat's going to be put up. Now, it may send sparks down and put it on your house. But if the same tree is sitting where there's fuel underneath the eave or underneath the balcony or something, it can also do that. So, you see the little trees there that they got scorched, but they were trimmed up high enough where they didn't catch fire. Slurry got to the ground, they had good defensible space. This trailer was, a firebrand got on it, burned the trailer, but the trees were trimmed up enough where it didn't burn the trees around it. It scorched some of them, but didn't put it in the ground again. And all those houses burned trees around them. Most of them were burned with ground fires, not with trees. And this is that, I'm not talking about grass carried where it hit the wooden fence or the, well, it doesn't show that seat plane very good, but there's a seat plane there. And I want to make that, the target is only effective when it gets to the ground, when there's manpower on the ground. So it really doesn't do much good just to have slurry bombers slinging slurry out in front of a wildfire unless you have the manpower and stuff to get there and actually eliminate the fuel in front of the fire. And so a lot of us think that the slurry planes do a lot to put out fires. Remember this, all fires are put out by firefighters on the ground, not the slurry plane. And the fire got to there and stopped, and he had a little on. And this was in the same neighborhood. He had a good fire, good pile right on his porch. This particular guy, I know him, and he had furniture out in his yard too. His furniture caught fire, and he had a hose, and his wood pile didn't get burned. But he was really lucky. And here's another house up in that same area that is probably not what you want if there's a fire coming through it. And here's one that has it done right. Fire, fuel wood is adjacent to, but far enough from the house where the radiant heat probably wouldn't start the house on fire. Well, I hope I didn't get too much of your time.
I don't need as much as you. I don't know as much as you do.
Thank you.
Let me use that, Lisa. This little mic. Will you get anything from that?
I think we're pretty good, that might be. No, we don't have that one.
Give us just a second. This is my wouldn't take me very long. If I can figure out how to use its mouse. Let's see. Do I need to Okay, all right. Dick got a lot of really nice slides. He's got a lot of really good information, and there's a wealth of knowledge in this area. He and his men and all the Forest Service people have been a real boon to me because I've learned a lot. Right quick, and this won't take probably 15 minutes, but somebody asked me yesterday, Harvey, what's his name, Harvey T, at the radio. We did a little radio spot, and he said, well, Mr. Crocker, how did you get into this forestry stuff? What got your interest there? You know, so I had to tell him. Well, I was about this tall, 3 or 4 years old. I got a Smokey Bear doll for Christmas, and me and old Smokey, man, we went to the mountains every summer on vacation. New Mexico, Colorado. We fought fires, bears, and everything else that came down the road. So it made quite an impression on me. So I grew up thinking I wanted to be a forest ranger. When I went off to school, Oklahoma State, they got a great forestry department, great agriculture school, and I enrolled in forestry. Well, at the end of the first year, that's a tough course. That's a 146-hour baccalaureate degree, you know, with a summer school. It's a 5-year BS. the end of that first year, my dad and I decided maybe I ought to try something else. So I skipped over to something a little easier, which was chemistry, but it was easier. But that was my cup of tea, and my family's all been in it. How many of you have heard of FIREWISE programs? And then there's a lot here that know a lot of the principles and what it's all about. It's just a national recognition program for subdivisions and communities and things that have decided to take proactive measures. And that's what Dick's been talking about all evening, is what we need to do to make our communities FIREWISE. So I'm not going to get into that so much. I'm going to get into what we're doing in my neighborhood with respect to starting the FIREWISE program. We started last November. I'm in Black Forest. Now we have a board of directors, a dozen people, and so we're somewhat organized. And I realize within the village you have subdivisions. There are some HOAs around, and outside the village, where you're in what we call the county, there are HOAs. Alto is a good example. You guys should be able to get one started there fairly easy because you are organized. If not, it's going to be dependent on the people to all get together and sponsor this thing. Anyway, the NFPA Association is who, it's their project. It's usually administered through the state forestry departments, although it is a national program. We've been FIREWISE here in Ruidoso since 2003, and I believe last year you re-upped the charter, so I guess it's every 10 years you re-up your charter as a FIREWISE community. So that's Ruidoso now, and that's it. That's the whole village. The village of Ruidoso Forestry Department, Dick and his men, there's Eddie Sines and Eric and Nala. Eddie was, there he is. Okay, now I see him. He blends in back there. Him and his men are the authority within the village that will assist you in getting one of these programs started. That's what I was just saying. If you're outside the village, you'll need to go through the state. Dan Ware is in charge of that for the state, but it would filter down to Frank Silva, who's the state forester here for New Mexico Forestry Department. So Dan Ware, that's his email address. I can give it to anybody later. Of course, you can just go to the New Mexico Forestry website and get all this same information. But you need the sanctioning body, let's call them, and within the village it's Dick and his boys, and outside it's the state. What we did in Black Forest, our board voted to have a program. They elected me chairman. There's 5 of us on our committee. It's the neighborhood committee, the task force that's gonna monitor this thing and run it through start to finish. And really I shouldn't say finish because you never really finish it. You know, this is a dynamic thing. Once you clean your neighborhood up and get it the way it should be, then you've got to continue to carry forward with those activities and probably remind some people occasionally that they need to work on their areas. But once the committee's formed, then you get your authority, which in our case in the village will be Dick or one of his foresters. And they'll come out and do an assessment. They'll drive through the neighborhood with your committee, get out, you'll talk about different places. He'll make a list. He'll give you some directives at this needs to be done or that needs to be done. And then it's up to the committee to carry it on to the next step. It's up to the committee to implement it once you get started. The very first thing they've got to do, ours is going to go out March, the first week or so of March, is compose the letter that goes to all the homeowners. Homeowners or lot owners, which if you know Black Forest, you know there's more lots than there are homes up there. And those are going to be a little more difficult. I'll get into that in a minute. But you compose the letter, explain the intentions, the benefits of doing this, and what kind of a time frame you have in mind, to try to get this thing completed. We're going to, like I said, 1st of March, send our letters. We're hoping to do like a 6-month time frame. Hey, it may be 9 or maybe 12 months at some point. But we do have a little kicker in our hip pocket here in the village that you don't have out in the county, the state can help you with this, but we do have this ordinance, this forestry ordinance. And we're gonna mention that in the letter, because that's what it's gonna come to if you have some folks, or I won't personalize it, some lots or some things that don't get cleaned up, but they ignore you, they throw the litter in the trash. We know that's gonna happen, so we will mention the ordinance, and he has a lady over there, Kathy Richardson. She's kind of a top sergeant type, and in the end, she's the one that sends the documents to the court to bring to flash the ordinance in somebody's face. She's the one that does it, so she's very helpful. We're going to send reminders probably at 3 or 4 or 5 months to some of them that doesn't look like they're doing anything. In the end, the committee will be watching this. Like every month, we're going to take a drive through the neighborhood and make notes, you know, where work's been done and where it hadn't been done. There's some that just obviously hadn't gotten touched. We're going to go back out with another mailing, like I said. But anyway, once you think you've gotten, let's say, 80+% in some kind of compliance with the ordinance and with FIREWISE principles, all the stuff Dick was telling me about, Defensible space and all of that. Once you think you've got 80+%, then you bring the fellow, hopefully, that did the assessment to start with, bring him back, drive around the neighborhood again, let him give you pointers and ideas as to either what it will take to bring the rest of the neighborhood into compliance, or he might agree that, hey, at this point, I think you've done a good enough job, we'll go ahead and we'll apply for the registration of your neighborhood as a FIREWISE subdivision. And when it's done, you'll get recognition. You're going to, like this fellow here in the picture. And there's plaques and signs, some more pictures here in a minute. I'm trying to move a little quicker. You can bet, in Black Forest, we're going to put that plaque right up by those castle gates at the front. And I have it on pretty good authority that the people are, the realtors and all, think this is a great idea. This could have all kind of benefits for you. There is an annual report. I'm going to try to back it up. There is an annual report the committee has to do every year because it's a dynamic thing. Like you say, you clean your neighborhood up once, but you need to stay after to keep these areas cleaned up. Right now, for example, I had some areas that looked great in my yard. We had a pretty good monsoon last year, so I've got grass this high grown, and that's when you get your weed whip out and clean it, because that grass, there's your low burning fuels, and it'll really light up good and move right up to your house. So anyway, I'm not going to spend much time here. This was Dick's. I just had this one slide in there. All the various things he's been talking about on defensible space and creating that. Move that firewood out, or get gas logs like I did. It's on the second floor. I'm not going to carry it. I got all that out of my system when I, all of that smoky bear all around. So get the lighter fuels, do all of that, excess vegetation along the roadway. Driveways, roadways can help stop a ground fire. So that's good. I've had a question by one of my members. When they survey a lot of these old neighborhoods, that neighborhood's been there 35, 40 years. The survey showed that the city property came up into this fellow's front yard by about 15 feet. And he wants to know, well, who's going to clear that out and take care of that? And, well, it's his house, it's right there above it. And I would think, I certainly would if the surveys were off a little bit from where the road was. But it is a valid question that Dick and I'll have to discuss, I guess, at some point, if there's city property there. Like I say, if I owned the home behind it, I would take care of it myself. There's several other additional activities that a FIREWISE community could do. And I don't know if Dick's ever had really any of these kind of things where you have a chipping day for residents to remove the excess vegetation and bring slashing things down, set up a chipper and chip. The thing is, we have an advantage with the grapple trucks. Right. So these are ideas that FIREWISE has. I mean, hold time needle or debris removal day with the local fire department. Well, sure, you want to keep your gutters cleaned out. I've decided I'm not going to put gutter. We just built this house 4 years ago, but I don't think I'm gonna put gutters on it. That's the best place in the world for the needles to gather, and let me tell you, they burn like everything, so I don't think I'm gonna use gutters. Anyway, here's another good idea though, is to hold a FIREWISE Education Day, and this falls right in line with what we're doing here with E&MU in April, and Mary told, I think you mentioned that earlier, April 11th and 12th. That's going to be a great program. There's going to be a little trade show too, demonstrations, and so that came right out of the FIREWISE manual as something that's really good to do. And or maybe if there's any city property or safe property within your neighborhood that's kind of common property, that's everybody's, you know, if it needs some cleaning up or whatever, just pick a Saturday and let everybody get their rakes and shovels and chainsaws and come and do a little good for the neighborhood. So anyway, benefits, I've mentioned some already. It definitely becomes more safe and secure once that you have brought it into line with FIREWISE principles. It is more attractive. This is definitely more attractive when they're cleaned up, but that's not why you're doing it. You know, you're not doing it to make it pretty, but it will be prettier. But that's a byproduct of the act of bringing your home and property into compliance. Posted FIREWISE approval, like I said, makes for easier sales, increased property values. That'll look real good to new people looking around if they see that sign when they come into your neighborhood. And it can, that's a big can, there's no guarantees with any of this, might help on your insurance or just sustain the cost. I don't know about y'all, I've heard all kinds of horror stories. Mine stayed pretty much exactly the same. My insurance did, that's where we live. But I've heard of folks getting letters saying their insurance company pulling out. I mean, the little bear has had its effects, but this is something we can do to fight back a little bit. These are preventative measures. And this country does, 1, 2, 5% spend the money on preventative measures that they do on suppression. I think they got that out of balance a little bit. Our LBFRC group kind of stands for that. We'd like to see a lot more preventative measures brought about. And FIREWISE is one way to do it. Of course, the kicker, it may save your life, your neighbor's life, and your property if you will push for this program in your neighborhood. I had that one, I'm going to skip because he had it in his slides. That is such a cool picture, though. I mean, you can see how that fire came right down that mountain, got to the area that was treated, stopped, and there were 40 homes in that group right there, and they didn't anyone burn. So this is good ideas. They work. And there's some pretty pictures. We hadn't seen that in a while, and I thought maybe I'd end up with that. Those are some pleasant sights, and I guess what attracted us all to this little mountain hamlet we call Lugos. So anyway, I'll do questions and discussion.
Any questions we can help answer?
So, we live out in Capitan, so that would be out in the county area. Can we have an assessment by anybody from the court?
State Forestry Office, they're in Captain, will do that for you.
They will? Great.
I thought Frank might be here tonight, but he's not.
So if you live, I live in the Sun Valley area, and so if there are people who aren't doing anything, there are lots of them, there's just doesn't seem to be any enforcement.
Unfortunately, the county didn't have any ordinances for people to do it. The village, we do have the village ordinance that requires fitting the specifications in the ordinance. But I know that you've got some groups out there that are doing a lot of work.
Thank you, Dick.
Should be scared as heck because the fire was just right there. But if that's what FIREWISE was intended for, is for neighborhood groups to get together. We have a group of people here that are really concerned about the village, so the whole village is a FIREWISE community. And that's one of the things that helps get us going, it helps get grants, and helps get a lot of other things by doing that. But it's just, you know, we're all in this together. My house burns, you can burn somebody 3 miles away, so.
A lot of people think that when they stack all the wood right near the house.
Well, one thing you can, whenever they do that, is they're endangering their house, they're not endangering
Oh,
yours. Yeah,
The sparks for your house.
yes.
Yes.
I have sort of a comment to add. There's I do a lot of hiking up there in Black Forest, and you've probably seen me driving up there. A lot of the folks in the neighborhood know who I am, but there's been this woodpecker that I've been studying out there. There's a woodpecker that lives out there. I'm pretty sure it's actually the ivory-billed woodpecker. They listed it as extinct, but I think it's been able to hold on in our forest, and mostly because it eats that bark beetle. That's its main food source. It's a really, really awesome bird, and it does live through the winter. I had an email from a forestry guy saying, oh, you can't sell these feathers, because I found some of its feathers on the ground. They're like, this is a migratory bird, but it actually stays in the winter over here, because I've seen it during the winter. And it needs a place to stay. Like, I know that all the thinning means well and everything. But the trees actually help attract moisture. And the trees give a home, and especially the big dead trees, they have the woodpecker like holes in them. You'll see these holes.
Good
And
habitat, yeah, the dead trees,
right.
I understand.
You'd be amazed at the evapotranspiration ratio of the tree. I mean, they say they draw
Attract moisture.
but trees use a lot of moisture. And one of the reasons that we're in such fire danger here is we got too many trees for the amount of moisture. So the leaves dry and makes it a lot more susceptible to catastrophic fire than if there were fewer trees. The area around here, if you look at some of the historical records, were mostly open with a few patches of trees. And now and then, we've got way too many trees. And so, if you're trying to get back to something that's close to what nature intended, and also to help preserve the beauty of the area and the habitation of the area, then, in my opinion, you gotta get trees. If you don't, it's gonna burn. I'll promise you. Sometime it's gonna burn.
We have time for maybe one more.
Speaking of which, I'll just throw out something. Mary, both of you guys showed the photo of the community that had the fire break up above the community up on the hillsides. Was that an actual fire break where area was cleared, so many yards uphill, or?
They just cleared the debris, kinda like we do. They thinned the trees and trimmed them up below. There's been a lot of work on fire breaks, and fire breaks in this country, some of them work and some of them don't. In that particular one, it worked because the fire was backing down. They didn't have any spotting across it. And so it just depends on the characteristics of the individual fire, whether the fire breaks work or not.
Well, my question would be, are we doing that in Ruidoso or surrounding
The whole
communities?
town is a fire break.
Sorry?
The whole town is a fire break.
The whole town is a fire break,
That's
or
all.
has a fire break? Are we a fire break for Hondo Valley, is that what you're saying?
No, we're a fire break for ourselves. I mean, that's what the thinning does.
Well, what I saw was a line above town in the tree line.
Right.
Do we have such a line in the tree line above towns?
Each area is different. What we have here is that because of our WU group here, the reservation has done a lot of thinning on our boundary. The Forest Service has done a lot of thinning on our boundary. It's not what you'd call a fire break by any means, but what we're all trying to do here is protect the village from anything that comes from the south or west. And that's the area we're concentrating on as far as the municipality is. And so the village ordinance was set up so that each lot is thinned as a fire break. And so your neighbor's fire break for your house and vice versa. And so because fire breaks are expensive to maintain, the Forest Service, a lot of years ago, spent a lot of money making fire breaks. And because that they didn't have the money to go back and maintain them, in a few years, they grew up and most of them are gone by now. And so, in a habitated area like we have here, with individual responsibility of maintaining that, then it kind of divides the cost and helps you, as a community working together, keeps the whole place safe, as opposed to trying to rely on some 200-foot wide line. And so I guess I'm a proponent of thinning, non-victim home, fire breaks.
per se. We did get a new grant, what was it, last year? That's gonna, it's gonna do about 1,300 acres out, scattered out in some different plots on the west side of town. I mean, that's all a good idea. We bought this lot years ago because I liked where it was, and then I got my house built. Somebody said, well, you know, the fires don't come from the southwest. I'm lot number 5, 4321, that's Forest Service. So anyway,